Good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. I am Elizabeth Bernhard. I am the Executive Director of the Manufacturing Growth Alliance, or MGA. MGA is a statewide nonprofit headquartered in Benton Harbor, Michigan, and we are exclusively dedicated to the unique needs of Michigan's small to medium-sized manufacturers. We're the only trade association in the state really dedicated to Michigan small to mediums. And so we help our members all across the state building services and programs that are designed for their unique needs. And so we are really excited to bring you this presentation today that is brought to you by our partners at Harvest Solar. So I want to give you just some housekeeping items, the general webinar stuff we're all used to by now. So we will have some opportunities during the presentation for you to participate. You'll see some polls where we ask for you to provide us some input, some feedback about your own organization. I will also unmute you so that you can personally unmute yourself and ask questions personally of our presenter. You also have the opportunity to put your questions into the chat. Like most webinars, we have some time dedicated at the very end to take your questions. If you'd rather hold them to the end, that's fine too. And this session is being recorded, and it will be saved later to MGA's YouTube channel. And I will also be emailing all of you both a recording of today's session as well as Christian's slides. So with that, I'm so excited, like I said, to have Harvest Solar here with us today and Christian Groesbeck. Christian is with technical sales with Harvest Solar. And as somebody who supports the manufacturing industry, I think that you will find Christian's background both very impressive and also relevant for today's conversation. So Christian has a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Michigan, and his experience ranges from working with a global tier 1 auto supplier to working as an engineer and project manager at Stryker to supporting the wind industry at SkySpecs, who provides autonomous blade inspection services. So very impressive background. In addition, he's been with Harvest Solar for a while, and Harvest Solar is a family-owned Michigan-based company headquartered in Jackson, Michigan. And their story is really fascinating to me because they really got their start by talking with thousands of farmers and thousands of ranchers about their desire to cut back on their energy costs. So that's where Harvest Solar comes in. They launched to support the agricultural industry with energy conservation efforts with solar, but have since expanded both in Michigan and across the country in supporting commercial industries as well as residential properties. So you'll learn all about their services today. So Christian, I turn it over to you. You're welcome.
Awesome. Thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah, as Elizabeth said, I'm Christian Groesbeck at Harvest Solar, based in Grand Rapids, Michigan myself, but we really operate across Michigan and the Midwest. So as she explained, my background, I grew up in a small manufacturing facility with my parents working there, and I got to see firsthand a lot of how these facilities operate and kind of what the day-to-day looks like in there. And so now that I'm on the renewable side and helping from creating solar energy, I can really see how it can partner well between the energy independence, the lowering the electricity costs, and giving you control over, everything's popping up right now. Give you control and help you kind of run your business more efficiently, while also kind of providing a little bit of an environmental benefit. So today, what I really want to speak about is going over financially, what does a solar system look like for your business? So overall, I want to go through real briefly just who we are as Harvest Solar, talk about how solar works, give everyone kind of a baseline of information so that you can comprehend what it would look like for your facility. We'll go through some financial incentives to see how this can be even more viable for your facilities. And then we can talk a little bit about how you can design around different aspects, your property, your building, and look at some case studies to see firsthand what it looks like, what's the payback, what's the capital investment that you're going to have with it. As Elizabeth said, please submit questions. I'll be pausing kind of throughout the presentation so that we can have a little bit of discussion and go back and forth and answer real time what you guys are wondering. Want to make this a little bit interactive. We will have time at the end too to go through some further Q&A. if you guys have other questions just around utility structures, misconceptions, etc., feel free to really ask me anything. We want to be a resource here to be able to support you guys in whatever questions you have around solar. So to get started, I want to know a little bit about you guys and who we're presenting to so I can help guide the journey. So a couple things we just want to see. What's kind of the interest that you guys have around solar for your business? Is it the energy independence, reducing carbon footprint, lowering your electricity costs, or something else?
Thanks everybody for putting your responses into the chat. We are pretty close to 100% participation. We'll give you a one more minute.
Wow.
Cool. Well, like we assumed, you guys are here to see what financially makes sense for a solar array. So a lot of you guys, over 50%, are looking at reducing your overhead. All right. Next quick poll. There's a lot of variation between different manufacturers. So wondering, where do you guys typically fall? There's big manufacturers that are, I've seen bills for $100,000 a month, but we also know there's a lot of small manufacturing facilities that are, only a couple grand. So if you guys can take a minute and enter in that information, that'd be helpful. All right, that's probably good. All right, so a bit of a mixed bag, a few on the smaller side and a few on the larger side. Awesome, thanks. Elizabeth, I'm gonna jump over this next one actually. If my slides were, there we go. So a little bit more about Harvest Solar. Like Elizabeth said, we're founded in 2006. We're a family-owned business and really got started in the agricultural scene. But as we've grown and expanded, there's been a lot more focus around commercial and industrial properties as there's really a huge need for that and a great fit for solar and a lot of manufacturers. So we've done hundreds of projects throughout different businesses in the Midwest. We have another office down in Illinois, but majority of our work is done here in the state of Michigan. I think the one thing that really sets us apart than other solar installers is that we are a true turnkey service. So we have in-house engineering, we have in-house project managers. We're going to be the ones going through the permitting, the zoning, the interconnection policy. We are the construction crew and we are the licensed electricians. So really start to finish, we're going to be the ones that are there on site doing the whole project for you guys. And part of my role and part of our team is helping with that initial design and showcasing how this can make sense for you guys, really looking at what different financial incentives there are and seeing how we can design the best system for you guys to give you the best return. So it's a lot easier to just show instead of say what we are. So this is what typical projects will look like for Harvest Solar. We can do roof mounts, they can be ballasted, they can be flush mount. We can do a lot of ground mount systems in rural areas. And we can even take on some different projects like a carport. But this is more of just giving you the scale of what a typical project looks like for us. What we aren't are things like on the left where we're getting into really dense areas, or in the bottom right, looking at taking over 100 plus acres of land to do a solar farm. we kind of fill that niche between being that utility scale solar developer and kind of the two guys in a truck doing some residential stuff. So really looking to support that in between, helping those medium-sized businesses. So just a little 101 on how solar works. So really what a solar panel is you have two different charge layers. The sunlight's going to be hitting that, and a photon is basically bouncing an electron across. And so we're able to basically steal that and borrow it and run it through a direct current system. We convert that to AC and make that run your buildings. So majority of the time, what we're looking at is what we call a distributed generation system, or behind the meter BTM. So once that energy is coming from the solar panels, the way it would look for your guys' businesses is that DC power goes through an inverter. It is matched up to what is on site for you guys. So if you're running 483 phase, the inverter will then be able to match to that and provide it for your business. Anything that comes from the solar is going to be used on your site first. Anything that is overproduced from the solar, say it's high noon on a Sunday and you're not using much electricity, it's going to be pushed back to the grid. And if you don't have enough energy coming from the solar, then it's going to be pulling from the grid. So your building really won't know the difference between solar electricity and power from the grid. That's just going to blend smoothly together. The one thing that I do want to call out, one misconception with this is that if the grid is down, people think, well, I have solar, so I'll be able to still power my facility. That can be true if you have battery storage, but for the most part, it's more of a safety concern that solar can't power your facility, and that's because you have the ability to backfeed onto the grid. And so if the grid is down and there's a line worker on there, and our solar panels are pushing energy out and energizing the lines, that's a safety risk. So it's not from a functional thing, it's more of just a safety protocol. So this is a bit of an eye chart, but just wanted to kind of outline the three main areas that business can take advantage of renewable energy. So there's distributed generation, which I kind of just outlined. There's power purchase agreements, and there's utility programs. So starting on the left, looking at a distributed generation system, this is what I just showed. This is on-site solar production. The customer owns it. The majority of the electricity is used on site. So you can see on the bottom, you might have been paying 12 cents a kilowatt hour before. Now the solar cost, the levelized cost of that might be 4 cents. So you're saving 8 cents a kilowatt hour for everything that you're using from your own solar. And you get to export any of it at a slightly reduced rate than retail. So you still are getting a financial benefit for anything you put back on the grid. A power purchase agreement is a situation where typically there's another owner. So you'll have an investment owner that will buy the array, and that can either be on-site or it can be off-site, but there's an agreement that you're going to be the off-taker of that power. So this can be beneficial in a few ways. If you don't have the capital to do it, then you can have an investor purchase the array, and basically you guys both share the cost savings, but there's a little bit longer payback on that. Or if you don't have sufficient space at your facility to offset everything, this is a good option. The last one is just through the utilities. So a lot of the utilities will have their own renewable programs where you're buying offsets, renewable energy credits. This is typically just a additional fee to your monthly bill. You're not owning any of the energy, you know, the solar array or the wind array or whatever it's going to be. But sometimes this is the only options that people have given their space or the capital that they have. So really what Harvest focus in is more of this distributed generation. We definitely do PPAs, but majority of the work that we do is trying to offset the energy at your guys' location. I see a question, but I can follow up on that in a little bit. So we do a fair amount of ground mount and roof mount. So solar doesn't always have to be a roof mount on your facility, depending if it's, you know, not a great orientation or you've got a lot of rooftop units. So ground mounts are great options if you have the land available. The benefits of it are we get to tilt at a better angle. So we're really straight south facing at about 35 degrees. That's great for production. That's great for snow loads to be able to just slide right off of it. And actually, the panels get to produce energy from the backside of it as well. So you get a little bit higher production from a ground mount, but you do need land for it. Whereas a roof mount, it's already an existing structure. You're not taking up any more space. You're not getting in the way of any future expansion plans. And there are opportunities to have non-penetrating options if you have like a standing seam roof, or if it's flat, then you can do a ballasted system. So you're not always having to screw into your roof and worry about leaks from that perspective. And then we do have the option to be creative with systems to fit your guys' needs. So if that is solar carports, battery storage, etc., that's definitely things that we can offer. So getting into it, is solar cost effective? I think everyone might have anchored opinions around what this actually is, but if we look at the last 10 years, the learning curve on solar has really been huge. I mean, wind has dropped quite a bit, but nothing has dropped quite as much as solar. And as you can see, really the cost of electricity, solar and wind are in majority of situations the cheapest form of energy that you can create. So when we pair that with, is it environmentally better? Wind and solar are magnitudes less than coal and natural gas for the CO2 emitted. You guys are probably not going to put a wind turbine on top of your facility. So when you're looking at cost and environmental benefits, solar really is a great option for all customers. So now what you guys are probably waiting for, financially, how does this make sense for me? So there's three big incentives that we see people in Michigan taking advantage of. The first one is the federal investment tax credit, the ITC. This has been around for a long time. It was starting to sunset, but the Inflation Reduction Act extended this for another 10 years. It put it back to 30% of project cost. And actually, there's now a few additional adders that we can talk about, so you can get higher than 30% federal tax credit. The other one is the USDA REAP grant, Rural Energy for America. So this grant also has been around for a long time, but the IRA has heavily funded it. And so this is a great option. It is technically through the USDA, but is not just for agriculture. Applies for any rural small business. It was an existing program. They just funded it and helped kind of expand it into more commercial applications. The last piece on the tax incentive side is you're able to depreciate this over 5 years. So there's a lot of tax incentives that you can get depreciating 85% of the asset. So to go into more detail about the federal ITC, everyone gets 30% tax credit, no matter who you are. That's for business and residential. It's just a different form, but everyone gets the same there. On the commercial side, there's additional adders that you guys can receive as well. So there's three different adders. There's the energy community, the distressed and disadvantaged or income community, and domestic content. So the first one, the energy community, is geographic based. So you just type in your address and you see if you're in the area or not. If you're in the area, you get the 10%. There's nothing else needed for it. For the low income, similar setup. It's geographic based. You type in your address and see if you qualify for it. But this one actually does require you to apply, as there's a limited amount of funds for that. Unfortunately, or fortunately, how you want to look at it, the funds were used up within weeks of them releasing that. So it's tough to get, but no, it is there. The last one is domestic content, looking to kind of expand manufacturing in the US for solar components. This is going to be a great thing in the future, but where we stand right now, there's still no regulations out from the federal government on it. And there's really no manufacturers that we feel would meet the potential terms of what those regulations would be. I think in the next year, we'll see a lot of developments in this and clarity around what this means. But as of right now, we can't claim this tax credit. but we are excited for it. So a few other things with the ITC. Um, the Inflation Reduction Act also gave a few other perks. So one is that not everybody will have tax liability. You guys might have already planned out what the next several years look like. You might have other assets you're depreciating, all these different things of saying, well, I can't take that tax credit. That doesn't really help me. So now it is transferable. So you can sell it once. So this is a great tool for people that you might be getting a $100,000 tax credit. Well, I can't use it this year. I'm stuck with it. Well, now you can sell it. There's brokers that you can work with. There's online auction sites. So you can sell it 80, 90 cents on the dollar, depending on what you go through, to be able to get that cash now. The other thing too is that if you are a tax exempt business, a nonprofit, municipality, et cetera, you can get a direct pay for it now since you don't have liability to begin with. So these are some great opportunities for people that financially it didn't make sense before without these tax credits. There's ways to take advantage of it. I do want to clarify, I am not a tax professional. So if you guys are looking at this stuff, make sure that you're talking with your tax professional to understand what makes sense for you guys. The other one we talked about was the USDA REAP grant. So this is for agricultural and rural small business to install renewable energy projects. This has been around, like I said, for a while. It used to be 25% of project costs. It is now 50% of project cost up to $1 million. So that is a good chunk of money, and the paybacks we see and the people that get the REAP grant, they're a year or two. So a great opportunity to have a couple year payback on a 30+ year system. They do award it quarterly now too, so there's more opportunities for you guys to be able to get in and get those dollars, so you don't have to wait a whole calendar year to see if you're gonna be funded for that. It is a competitive grant, so it is something that you can't just apply and expect the money. So it's scored out of 100 points, and essentially they force rank the scoring and then go down the list until they run out of dollars. So a couple things that we see that typically score well in areas that are customers that would likely get the REAP grant. There's additional points for people that are first-time applicants. There's bonus points for if you're in one of those low-income distressed areas. You get more points for having a higher energy offset and having a shorter payback on it. And then there's additional points that they provide discretionary for veteran and female ownership as well. So if any of those things fall in line with your guys' business, then REAP is a great opportunity to look to be able to get potentially 50% of your project covered.
And
So
there's a question in the chat I want to raise right now. Thank you, Locke, for raising it. He says, I think there's also a living wage union labor component to the IRA credit. Is that an issue?
no, so there is something for that for prevailing wage, but that is something that is only for projects that are over 1 megawatt. So it'd be a large facility that we would, and we can definitely handle that and have done a handful of projects with it. But majority of the projects that we do are excluded from that clause. So the last thing to note here is that we do have internal grant writers now. So this is something that we can, as that full turnkey service, can help you guys through that process. It's actually great on our part too, because we can help fine tune the design of the project to give you the most points on your application to give you the best chance to get awarded. So this is just kind of showcasing what I was talking about of geographic areas. The top right, you can see the federal ITC adders. Basically, anything where there's a color, you would be qualifying for either the energy community or distress community. So you can see a lot of Northern Michigan qualifies for this. Anyone from Big Rapids to Midland and North basically is in an energy community and will get 40% tax credit on their project. For the REAP grant, the definition for small business is decided on a handful of factors. It's usually employee count or revenue, and depends on the type of industry that you're in. But you would qualify as long as you're outside of a metro area. So you can see on the map, there's a kind of brown areas around Grand Rapids, Lansing, Flint, Detroit, Kalamazoo. As long as you're outside those metro areas, then you guys would potentially qualify for it if you meet the small business requirements. So when we talk about solar design, who's a good fit for it, who makes sense to have solar at their facility? We saw from the poll at the beginning, customers here are either kind of on the smaller side or on the larger side, anywhere from a couple grand to $10,000, $20,000, which is right in kind of the wheelhouse of where Harvest operates. So a lot of it, we want to keep the generation behind the meter. So we're trying to match what you guys use on an annual basis of what the solar production will be. These do take up quite a bit of space, so we are looking for a good amount of area, whether that is open space on a roof, preferably south, but east and west works good. I can talk a little bit more about that. Or if you guys are more of a rural area and have ground space available, that's a great situation, kind of like the photo behind me of doing a ground mount on the side of your property. We saw on those maps that rural definitely helps from an incentive standpoint. So qualifying for the REAP grant, getting into that energy community for the extra 10%, et cetera. And the last thing to talk about for financial return really depends around the utility, who you guys are with, and what their interconnection policies are around what size system you can do, as well as what their export credit is. So what you sell back to the grid, how many cents per kilowatt hour are they going to give you? So when we're looking at actual design for a facility, these are kind of the main things that we're looking at. So what's your annual usage of electricity, but also the time of use? Are you guys running one shift or three shift? Is it a bell curve throughout the day? Is it seasonal? That type of thing. We're looking at the space that you guys have to be able to do a ground or roof mount. We'll have to look at the electrical equipment. So really from a business's standpoint, is your transformer and your main panel sized appropriately, or is there a potential utility upgrade that we would have to do? And then, like we were just saying before, the utility structure is a big component of what the financial return looks like. So this is just to kind of give you guys an example of how we look at it. You can see annually and daily, we're looking at the profile of a customer's electricity usage. So you can see on the top, they are relatively flat here. You can see they peak a little bit more in the summertime, which is great to align with solar, as that's when we're producing the most electricity. And again, this looks more like a, two shift. They really operate from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. of high electricity usage. And then once you get out to closer, 9 p.m., it drops off. So this for us would be a great scenario. They've got great usage throughout the daytime, and they are a little bit higher during the summer. This is something to take a look at. This is one misconception that I hear a lot, is that everybody is saying, well, I don't have a south facing roof, so this isn't going to work for me. I know this is quite a bit of data within here, but if we're comparing everything to kind of best case scenario, which would be, call it 30 degrees facing south, that's 100%. If we're a little bit lower pitch on a south facing roof, we're about 90% of that. Well, if we're west with a low pitch, we're only 4% less. And if you do an east and west roof, you can use both sides of it. So you've got a lot more area. So clearly a directly south facing roof is great. At the same time, east and west on a flatter roof is actually a great scenario as well. Talking about the interconnection and how we can size the different systems, there is quite a bit into this, so I'll try and stay relatively high level on it. But a solar array is interconnected into a single meter. So a lot of facilities might have multiple meters, and and they're saying, well, I want the array to offset all of my bills. Well, it's going to actually be a few separate projects, and there's going to be, layers involved with that. It's definitely doable, but more just to know that a solar array is associated to offsetting a single meter. For the regulated utilities, there's 5 levels of interconnection. Um, and it just passed actually, it was written into law last week, but passed from last fall around increasing this. So now the level 1 through 3 provide that export tariff, the distributed generation. So anything you send back to the grid, you get a bill credit for. So you can go up to a basically half megawatt system AC, 550 kilowatts, and get credited back for the bill. Anything larger than that, you don't get credited for. So that's just something to keep an eye out for. Another thing to take into account here is that we do size a lot of projects to fit within that level 2 just because of the interconnection process. So, it's a couple weeks and hundreds of dollars to do that. If you get into larger systems, you're going to have a lot more evaluation and study from the utility, and that usually turns into months and thousands and tens of thousands of dollars for that. So just something to keep an eye on. Another thing too is that somebody might say, well, I've got a huge roof. Let's put as much as we can on there. We are actually capped, so we can only put a size system that meets 110% of your annual usage. So we will look back at your last 12 months worth of electricity bills, and we can only build something that basically is going to offset that. There are limitations around parcels, so that's usually things that we will take a look at and look at different maps to make sure we're okay there. Most of the time, we can find solutions with the township and rezoning to make it happen. There's also things just around to understand easements and setbacks. So if there's utility lines going across your property, just those type of things. And then for a lot of manufacturers, people are sometimes on a demand rate charge, and that typically does not pair well with solar. Doesn't mean it doesn't work. It just usually means the rate that you're on after solar will likely change to give you more of a benefit to get that export tariff and to offset the real-time usage. So that was quite a bit of information. And so I want to show you guys more hands-on, some examples that might relate to your business so you can see what this would actually look like. So here's 2 examples of 2 different projects that I've looked at in the past. And just giving you the high bullets of it, we can take a look at the one on the left. This is a manufacturing facility, about 50,000 square feet. They're on consumers. They spend about $15,000 a month on electricity. With this, they're south facing. We were able to put a 200 kilowatt roof mount system on there. They were in an energy community, so they get 40% federal tax credit and have the 5-year depreciation. So you can see this project cost, the initial capital is going to be about 600K, but you get that depreciation and the tax credit. So the payback is about 5.8 years, which is pretty standard for somebody without any other grants. Commercial projects, we see a lot in that 5 to 7 year range. So the one thing to take into account that I really like to look at is the levelized cost of energy, the LCOE. That's essentially what you're paying for the electricity over the life of it. So a lot of the utilities right now, you're anywhere from 10, 12, 14 cents a kilowatt hour. Investing in this gives you electricity at a much, much lower rate and gives you, a big financial upside. The way I like to think about it is that you are paying for this and it's yours and you have to have that upfront capital, but the utilities are also buying their own capital and you're basically paying the loan payment for them to be able to handle that. The one on the right is a little bit smaller of a system. So these guys are paying about $4 grand a month. They didn't have a structurally sound roof, and so this is something that we put on the ground. This is a 110 kilowatt system, so a little less or a little around half the size. But these guys did receive a REAP grant. So they had 30% tax credit and that REAP grant and the 5-year depreciation. So you look at a system that costs 350K and you're getting about a 3-year payback on that. So their levelized cost of electricity is only 2 cents a kilowatt hour. So after they have that paid off in a couple of years, the next 30 years, they're going to be producing energy and offsetting majority of their facility at 2 cents a kilowatt hour. So really a great way to reduce your overhead costs, hedge against future rate hikes. We just saw consumers got another one passed where their rates are going up. DTE is asked back to back to years to get their rates increased. So really a great opportunity to kind of normalize and expect what your utility rates are going to be and reduce your overhead costs. So this is just kind of a quick study of what a one pager looks like from us. So clearly we can go through a whole proposal, but if a customer provides us with a utility bill, we can provide kind of a quick estimate back just to give a ballpark on what the system would look like. So this is something that any of you guys would be able to easily see. We would look at LiDAR data and weather data, build what your facility looks like, what an array would look like to offset there, and give you guys a ballpark on, hey, this is a $500,000 project with again around a 5.7-year payback. So I think that's all I have for today. So we can open it up to some questions.
Looks like
Um,
3 questions in the chat, Christian.
yep, I'll read it off.
Right.
The first one is regarding rooftop. What's the clearance you need between the edge of the roof and other rooftop units? Yep. So there are setbacks that we have to be from. It depends on the roof type, whether it's flat or pitched. So that's things that it's typically 6 feet is what we provide. We can go 15 feet back, and then we don't need fall protection or railings. That also is the same for like skylights. That's considered a unprotected area. So those are things that we work through in the design to make sure that we're meeting proper setbacks and meeting code there. Yep. Have you ever installed a solar system for assisted living facility? Um, I personally have not, but I know we've done a few similar facilities like that. The one scenario with that that's tough is, again, when we talk about a solar project is to 1 meter. So it usually doesn't work very well with like apartment buildings because you'll have 50 meters on it. But there's scenarios where, like in assisted living, if you're on one primary meter that then is subbed out, or it's just all part of just the 1 meter, then that's a great situation to have and a great way to lower overhead. The next question is the REAP grant 50% of costs after the ITC or before? It is before, so it is the total project cost of it. One thing to take into account is that the REAP grant is actually considered taxable income. So if you do receive that grant, you are going to be taxed on it, but you are getting the tax credit. So it's just pulling part of that tax credit to cover that expense. Do you service the Upper Peninsula? Yes, we do. We've done a handful of projects up there, and my boss is working on a pretty big one up there right now. What region do you cover? We cover, my team specifically is majority of Michigan, but we go throughout the Midwest. So we're licensed in, I believe, a dozen different states. And so a lot of that can kind of spread out. So later this afternoon, I'm meeting with the manufacturer. They're based in Michigan, but they've got a couple of facilities done in Indiana. So we're looking at all those combined. So we can do Indiana, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, etc. If you can do either, is it more economical to go rooftop or ground mount? It depends on the situation that you're in. I would say it's not a huge difference, but if there is a little bit of a difference, it's usually the ground mount. We don't have to worry about safety requirements for our crews doing the installation. We can pound post and install a little bit easier, and you get better production with the bifacial gain on a ground mount. So it's not a huge difference, but I would say ground mount is typically more economical. Is it possible to put ground mounts or solar in easement areas? I do not believe so. That usually we're not one, they wouldn't allow you to put it there, and two, we wouldn't be able to interconnect across the parcel lines between the easement and your parcel. How much does adding a battery add to the cost of a project typically? So that's a good question. There's no good answer to that because it's going to depend on each scenario. I would say typically it's going to be close to double the cost of what you guys are going to be spending. The larger you get is probably less than that. Um, so financially, batteries aren't quite there yet on a kind of behind the meter application. We definitely do it occasionally, but it depends more on the business type and what their situation is. If they have business critical things around refrigeration and can't have power outages, then batteries make sense because of lost revenue. But just as a backup, um, there's not a great financial return to it, and we do see it kind of dragging down projects. That being said, it's kind of at the beginning of its learning curve that solar was on 15 years ago, and so I think in the next handful of years, in 5 years, it definitely will be more viable. Can you add batteries in the future? Yeah, of course. So, clearly there's a benefit of doing everything once and not having to come back and re-go through that process, but you can always add batteries in the future. Um, Me personally, on my house, that's kind of my strategy. I put solar on several years ago and waiting until it makes a little bit more financial sense for me to add battery storage at my own property. But yeah, that's all doable.
Question, if a company who is attending today would like to consider if they're a good fit for going solar, what would their process be for getting considered by Harvest Solar?
Yeah, the easiest thing is providing a solar installer with a utility bill. So the utility bill is going to tell us a lot. So there's a lot of information that's out there. So if we get an address on the bill, there's going to be LiDAR data and information that we can look at from Google Earth to be able to see the facility and where it might make sense. Additionally, that's going to show most utility bills will have a little bar graph showing you what the last 12 months of your usage is. So we'll be able to match off of that. And it shows the utility structure. So we can financially model that to see what the best return is. So a utility bill really gets us pretty far to give you an estimate back.
And now is a good time if you have a question that you would like to raise personally, you can go off mute and ask it yourself.
Hey, Christian, this is Locke McCabe with Shepherd Advisors. I'm curious, I'm assuming you do your assessment at no charge, or is there a charge for getting your initial assessment?
Nope, no charge for that. So there's no payment from a customer needed, even for me to come out and do a site visit and go through that whole process. It'd only be after if you guys decide to give a thumbs up on a project that we would have any type of fee associated to that project. But everything up front is free of charge.
And realistically speaking, these days, once someone decides to go ahead with the project, what typically is the time frame for actual installation and actually getting electricity from it?
Yeah, great question. So from our standpoint, we have our variables in control. So we have large warehouse with megawatts worth of panels, and we got 8 different construction crews in Michigan here to build with. So we would be able to get out within a couple months and be able to go through that. The longer lead times are things that are kind of in the utilities control. So going through that interconnection agreement process and getting the correct permits to be able to go through that. So really from start to finish, while we could physically build it within several months, it's anywhere from, 4 to 8 months typically just to get through all those hoops.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Christian? You can either put them in the chat now or you can unmute yourself and ask. All right, Christian, I want to give you a chance to provide some closing remarks if you would like, including how they can contact you.
Well, there we go. Yeah, so here's my email and phone number. This slides will be shared out afterwards, so you guys will be able to get my contact information. But really, Elizabeth, thank you. Thank you to MGA for letting me come on and speak with you guys and walk you through what solar looks like for commercial and industrial buildings. This is a bit of a passion project for me. I grew up in a lot of manufacturing environments, and now being able to merge renewables and that together is a lot of fun. So it's been great for me, and look forward to potentially working with a lot of you guys.